Yeah, okay. I don't really know where that goes, but that's fine. All right, we're rolling here. So everything you say can and will be used against you. So, first thing I want to do is I kind of want to talk a little bit about kind of like what I'm doing and who you guys are and what we're trying to do here. So, my name's Jacob. I live in Seattle, and I am a indie game dev working on a um, space age survival simulator called Prospector. Probably need to come up with a better tagline. That wasn't too bad though. Um, did that sound like nonsense?
No,
um,
sounded fine.
And what we're doing here today is I've got a couple of my best buds on the line, Mike and Ryan, and they're super into games too. They're working in game stuff. Ryan's working on a board game. Michael's doing stuff in Unreal, and if they want to talk about that, they can. But today, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be working on a new feature for the game and kind of explaining out loud my thought process around kind of like how I think about my game development and how I take an idea from kind of like a problem space. There's a certain problem that I've identified, and I try to figure out kind of what I want to do to solve that problem. So we'll kind of like show you uh, basically the whole process, like beginning to end, and see how far we get. I'm not sure if we'll actually get to something working by the end of the call. I don't really know if I want to promise that at this point, but that's what we're doing today. Mike, Ryan, do you want to say anything about yourselves, or it's fine if you don't? We can just get into it.
I mean, I'm amazing. You're amazing. This is going to be fantastic. Okay, it's going to work. We're going to have something beautiful at the end.
Oh, okay. Ryan's gonna promise it.
Oh yeah,
I wish he
guaranteed.
hadn't, but he did. Okay, guaranteed success from Ryan. What you got, Mike? You got to say anything?
I'm not so optimistic. I mean, stuff takes a while, so we'll try.
Yeah, Mike is more experienced with the game development stuff, so it's this whole like you say it's gonna take 30 minutes, and then 3 months later you're still working on it.
Yeah, it's kind of how it goes.
But I'm more experienced in the unbridled optimism area than he is. So just go with
That's
me. All
that's the
right.
right place to be. Yeah, that's
Oh yeah.
definitely yeah. I
Just
wish I
put your
could go
head
back
down
there.
and bash through those walls
Yep.
till you get a brain like hemorrhage.
Cool. So on that note, on the brain hemorrhage note, why don't we go ahead and look at the current state of the game? I kind of want to show, this won't be everything that I have in it, but I want to kind of show a little bit of what I've been working on most recently so that I can kind of set the conversation up for the stuff that we're going to be working on today, because it'll illustrate like what problem I want to work on. Um, so what we've got going on here, and I've just realized that I'm probably not going to get any audio from this, but that's fine, is I've been working on kind of like a really crude day and night cycle. And the reason why I've been working on it, which you'll see here in a second, is that kind of like the core loop of this game is that it's a base building kind of crafting game, and it's kind of married with tower defense mechanics. So right now the screen is shaking because it's nighttime and big scary monsters come out at night. And one of the main things that you have to do as part of the game's progression is you have to survive these various night cycles. So what I've been playing around with is kind of like the fundamentals here. You know, you've got some basic laser turrets trying to defend your base. You've got these bugs that are attacking you in waves, which I can talk a little bit more about how that works here in a second. There's this thing on the ground right here that I'm kind of standing on that kind of looks like a bomb. It's like a stasis trap. So if you notice, like enemies were getting inside of the range of this and they were slowing down. So basically, I've been sandboxing, kind of playing around with different ways that I could give the player interesting kind of like toys, fun little like things to build to help them kind of like protect their base during the nighttime. And one of the things that's kind of interesting about this game, because it has this kind of open world format, is that unlike most traditional like tower defense games, there's no like set puzzle here or like a set path that the enemies are like walking through. Like if you think about a top-down puzzle game, or sorry, tower defense game, there's like a certain route that the enemies have to walk. And then part of the game is like you're building your towers in a strategic way along those various choke points in order to be like maximum efficiency and like protecting your base. Um, because this is open like this, one of the interesting things that you're going to be able to do in this game is kind of like build that maze for the enemies to walk through. And one of the ways that we could do that is we could do that with like, you know, basically using towers like as choke points because enemies can't can't walk through them. But that would be very expensive, and I think it would kind of like ruin the game dynamics because you would be building like a billion towers, and it would just like it's unrealistic to think that that's how it would work. So what we're going to need to figure out today is how is the player going to use the environment around them to basically design these different choke points and design their maze that they want the enemies to route through as they're trying to attack their base. And the way that I think we might solve that problem is with some kind of like basic barrier. So what I spent some time kind of thinking about and working on today, and I'm going to blow this up and zoom in a little bit, um, and sorry, this is probably hard to read, but this is kind of like how I work on the whiteboard. I love just as an aside, I love working on the whiteboard because um, I've seen people like do like crude mocks for stuff that they're coming up with, or I've seen a lot of people like do pen and paper, which is also great. I just really like the whiteboard because like anything you put on it is destined for the trash, so there's no attachment. So typically the way I start working on a new feature is I very rarely like go straight to the code editor, mainly because my background is in design, so I'm not really wired to work that way. Um, but I typically spend like a couple rounds on the whiteboard. So what we're looking at now, I kind of cheated a little bit. It's like version 2 or 3 of different ideas that I was noodling on. But the spirit of what I was trying to do stayed the same throughout. So it's kind of like this question has come up in the mechanics of the game is how can we give the player more control over enemy pathfinding? Pathfinding just being like how the enemies start from a spawn point and then they find their way to your base. Like how can the player strategically manipulate how they get from point A to point B in a way that is satisfying and interesting, like gives them a sense of authorship over the space, allows them to be creative and like how they solve that problem. Like there's multiple ways that they could do it. There's not like one broken, you know, like right way to do it. So I wanted to think a little bit about kind of like how that would work from like the most basic kind of ideas, and then I kind of like played around with some different concepts um, just to see how it would go. So starting out with probably the most obvious solution to this problem is, well, let them build some walls, right? So we've got these plain Jane walls, and the idea is that there's a huge hole here, obviously. I'll explain why that hole is there in a minute. But what walls would do is it's basically like, okay, like you can build a maze with walls. Um, and what could happen is if you didn't have a particular hole in the wall where the enemy could make their way through, then their pathfinding could update to say like what piece of the wall is closest to the thing that I'm trying to attack, and now make that my target instead. And then they could kind of like chew a hole through the wall. And that's how they would like bypass barriers like that. Otherwise, the game would be broken, right? Because you would build a wall and they couldn't get around it, and then like no fun for anyone, not even the bugs. Um, so when I was thinking about this idea, it also needs to kind of like work in harmony with some of the other features and mechanics in my game. So one of the things that you saw from the little demo that I showed is that one of the heavy mechanics is like you have this laser, this multi-tool, and you use it for harvesting resources. You use it for building structures. You use it for a lot of things. Because I think I'm kind of aspirational about this idea that like I want to take like one mechanic and come up with a lot of like interesting use cases for it instead of like having really big, you know, like different kinds of tools and like weaponry and stuff like that. Um, I'll probably add more stuff later, but for now I'm just trying to keep it simple. So because I'm trying to take this like really narrow approach as to how the player uses the laser, using traditional walls kind of creates an interesting problem or conundrum, because I could make it so that the player doesn't have to build the walls with their laser. They could just like appear, and they don't have that like printing mechanic that I was showing in the demo earlier. Um, but if bugs are attacking them, it stands to reason that the player would have a reasonable expectation to say, I'm going to need to repair those walls. And if the laser is used to repair walls and also attack bugs, if this was a solid wall and the bug was attacking, then the player's laser would hit the wall and repair the wall, but not shoot over the wall to hit the bug. And there are definitely like ways that I could think about kind of like going around that. But they would produce a lot of like interesting code complexity for me, and I just don't think that the idea is really all that interesting. So I kind of wrote that one out as a good starting point, and then I moved on to a second idea. So my second idea was I mean, like obviously one of my inspirations for this game, or anyone that makes a game about giant bugs in space with lasers, is Starship Troopers. So I was thinking about the ridiculousness that is that movie and how awesome it is, and how they had these fortification scenes where they would kind of like show the aftermath of a bug attack, and they had these turrets that were kind of like mounted on walls that were also like pseudo platforms. So it's kind of hard to see here because I'm not really that great of an artist, or not in terms of illustration. But the idea and the second idea is that the player can kind of like, there's a section of the wall that they can walk up onto. It's like a staircase or a platform. It's a platform. That's a much better explanation. And then there would be part of it that the player could shoot over. So they're kind of like standing on top of the wall, so to speak, which kind of solves the problem from the first one, because if they're standing on it, then we say laser shoot over, attack bug. If they're standing behind it, then we could have a mechanic that's like, oh, okay, you're not standing on the platform, you're not in range of the bug with your laser, you're going to repair the platform. And then the enemy attacks would work in a very similar way as they do with the walls. If there's an open path, the enemies can attack inside. If this is closed off, then they'll attack the nearest platform and try to chew it away. In which case, it would probably be the one that the player is standing on. So then we could do something fun there if the platform gets chewed out from underneath them. So that's idea number 2. Idea number 3 is throw all that basic shit in the trash. What's something a little bit more interesting that we could do? And try not to be too confined by this idea that there's like enemy pathfinding. It's kind of questioning like the problem a little bit. Like, is it really that big of a deal if the player doesn't have a way to kind of like design the path that the enemy follows? So in this one, the concept is called laser wires. And basically the way it would work is you would put down kind of like little, obelisks or whatever in the ground, or little kind of like prismatic statues, I guess. And you would be able to rotate those in a specific angle, and it would like shoot off a laser that would reflect off of other similar towers that were kind of like in its line of sight, and they may have like a max range, so you can't just like put down one and like cut off half the map or something. Like, there would need to be some kind of limit. But the idea is that instead of like building individual segments of a wall, you're kind of putting down these much like wider like fence posts that have this kind of like energy field connection beam across them. And what I wrote down here in my notes is that what this might do is it may not impact enemy pathfinding at all. Like, it could work that when the bugs attack, they're not smart enough because they're kind of dumb and mindless horde type enemies. At least these like first ones, the most basic ones, they're just going to run straight through that laser, and they're going to take like a base amount of damage, or there might be a roll or something. Like, it doesn't really matter. Like, the idea is that it's not an obstruction, and they're not trying to work their way around it, except for like the pillars, I suppose. They're walking through it and taking base damage. So in that way, it becomes kind of more of a trap. than it is like an actual barrier. And I guess there is a B alternative of this idea, which is, well, like it could be a barrier and the bugs are scared and they don't want to walk into a hot laser, which is understandable. And it may be that they see that there is a laser in the way of their path to their target. So they target the origin of that laser. So if the bug is trying to like get this this player right here, it knows that this line is between them and the player. What is the origin of this line? Oh, it's this laser. Okay, I'm going to go attack that. And then they'll kind of like systematically try to dismantle your laser grid is kind of like a different idea for this approach if we wanted it to still kind of like be about pathfinding. Then there's a fourth idea here, which I kind of borrowed from our sessions actually playing Age of Empires. Is I thought, well, what if I went more old school with this whole barrier thing and we combined the plain Jane walls with like a guard tower? So why? Like, what does that do for us? It obviously allows us to control pathfinding in the most basic way. And it kind of gets us around that problem of the player has a laser. The laser is used to repair structures like walls. But if they're in the tower, then they're kind of z-indexed above the terrain in a way that maybe like we can make it look like they're shooting down, and they're not allowed to move in the tower. So the idea is that you can close everything off, but then you're limited in how much space you can protect. Either you can put up these guard towers in the early game and basically put up a bunch of them, and the player can just like, when the wall is getting eaten away at different points, they can run around to their different guard towers and try to like, manage it that way. And then slowly over time, they can maybe replace those guard towers with more sophisticated defenses like laser turrets or different kinds of traps on the outside, like whatever it is. But maybe starting out, like the most basic thing that you have is just a really simple wall and some towers that you can stand in. And then you kind of have to work your way up to some of that more sophisticated tower defense mechanics or objects or unlocks or whatever you want to call it. So those are the four ideas that I looked at. I'll go ahead and pause there, and I'd like to have a bit of a conversation about this, maybe talk about alternative ideas that y'all might have, and then we'll see kind of where we want to go next. And I can obviously go back and play the demo again, or we can look at different ideas that we've already covered. But yeah, what do y'all think?
I really like I think the second one was the one that I was kind of leaning more towards out of the four, just because uh, I really actually think that's probably, I would say, one of the easier ways of doing it. Is just having a little platform where you can go up onto the wall and then shoot down from it. I was at first, when you were going through it, thinking of having different lasers, ones that would ignore the wall, but then I was thinking, well, that kind of doesn't seem right. Just from a play standpoint, it would have like one that would repair. You have a repair laser, and then you have one that would do a damaging laser, or something along those lines. But I didn't know exactly if that would work with the wall being there, and then you could shoot through the wall. It'd be kind of confusing in that aspect. So I didn't think that was, after you got through the whole thing, I didn't think that was actually viable, but I didn't know if that was actually something that you've already thought about as well. But the second one, I've seen it done in some other recent games, and that's what they've kind of, obviously you can go through the gates and be on the other side fighting them and trying to kill the bugs before they even damage your outpost or anything, like your wall or anything like that.
Right.
But that's the way they went.
What are some of those games, just so I can write them down?
The one that was the new one, it was I think it's like break.
Riftbreaker?
Yeah, Rift Breaker. That's what Yeah, that's the game that was, and they had a similar mechanic where you can't shoot through the wall, but you can get up on, you can like have little platforms, and you can like sit them up on there and shoot over
Yeah.
the wall. That's
Well,
kind of,
that could be like a combination of what 2 and 4 are. If you wanted to marry those into an idea, it could be like you build a wall, and then as a special kind of like accessory or attachment object, you could like build a platform on any segment of wall. So it's
yeah.
kind of like, yeah, like basically combining 2 and 4.
Yeah, I forgot what if they made it where you could be on the actual wall or they made it where you could just be behind it. I think they made it where it raises up to the wall a little bit and then you can shoot over it. Um,
Yeah.
but that's how they did theirs. And then you obviously could repair it. They have like a repair laser. Um, but
The repair laser is like on the mech, or you were saying an idea, and maybe I misunderstood what you were saying, but like you were saying there was a turret that would like just do repairs.
uh, mm,
Maybe I misheard that. I probably misheard that.
I'm pretty sure it's just a laser that you could repair it through what you have on your mech, and then
Yeah. So okay.
they
Yeah.
they don't have any. Well, they don't have any unmanned towers. It's all lasers and stuff like that. So
So that's actually another like interesting kind of not like a wrench in this whole conversation, but like one of the things that could change is just the mechanic in the game. The way it works now is that the laser does do damage and does repair things, but like you could have like a mod toggle or something to say like this is my repair ray and this is my attack ray, and attack
yeah,
rays like go over the wall and repair rays don't or something.
right.
Um,
That's what I was thinking when you first were like the very first thing. I was like, well, why don't you just change, like have different lasers? But then when I was thinking about it, is like, well, do you want to have like one of your damaging rays go through the wall and attack outside the wall?
yeah,
It
it
doesn't
starts to
seem
feel a
like
little
it.
strange.
Yeah, the only thing you could do would be if you had some kind of platform that would raise it so it looks like you're shooting down over the wall, because that doesn't really make sense that you could shoot through. I mean, it'd be kind of easier to code, that's for sure. You could just ignore all wall and just have it collide with everything else. But
Well, check this out. What if, now this is probably a bad idea, but I'll say it anyways because we're ideating here. What if the laser went through the wall and we wrote it off like the material of the wall was kind of like uh, uh, permeate or like a
yeah,
Jesus, I don't
perforated
know.
or
Yeah,
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 it's like it would accept the laser beam to go through, and like you would repair the wall and attack enemies on the other side at the same time. So
yeah.
you're
I
kind of
guess
like
like, yeah,
reinforcing in front of you and also like swiping on the other side of it.
it's like a chain link fence or something like that. You can get through it with a laser. Yeah, I can see that. You can definitely do it that way as well. Or even like what you were saying on 3 with the laser wires, you have like just a couple lasers going through. That would make sense that you could get through. But I mean, like if you're doing like a concrete wall or something like that, I don't know. That'd
Right.
be that
Well,
that that'd look really weird.
right. The yeah, for sure. That I think the reason why I kind of wanted to rule 3 out, but I didn't want to rule it out before I talked to you guys, is kind of like I don't really feel like it fixes the original problem as I outlined it, and maybe we disagree whether that's a problem or not, but I feel like there should be some way for the player to control enemy pathfinding. And with number 3, like uh, I think the behavior, the like the AI for the bugs is going to look a little strange if they're not like single targeting like segments of a wall. Like there's just something about that idea that like makes a lot of sense to me, and I think the laser like beam concept gets away from that because they can't like attack this Like they can't attack this, you know what I mean? Like they have to attack this or that. But if it was a chain link fence, like what you were saying, something that looked like it had holes in it, and there are ways that like we could design that so that it looks natural or natural enough, I guess.
Hmm.
Like that could work pretty well, I think.
Yeah. Um,
And I think it's less costly, like prototyping wise, um, than even the platforming. Because the thing about the platforming is the way that my collision works in the game right now is that there's a parent object for structures. And whenever the player is walking around and figuring out what spaces they're allowed to walk in, it's like checking to see if there's a structure there. So I would have to like basically have some kind of fork or condition statement of the logic to be like, oh, well, you can actually walk on top of this one thing, um, or like totally separate it from that parent and like make it a floating child that has all its own logic, which wouldn't be that
yeah.
hard. But like it's a lot of like additional complexity for something that may not be the best idea.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, Ryan, you are very quiet.
I was absorbing all of the information and letting Mike have his say. Real quick, while you were talking, uh, just file this away in the cool shit folder.
All right, let me
Sweet
pull out my
mechanic.
cool shit folder.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, I
So
got it.
it's a sweet mechanic. There, you have some kind of object that whenever you aim your laser at it, it refracts into all different like ways, kind of like the lightning thing from Forager.
So is it something that the player makes, or it's like something in the environment, or
It could be like something in the environment, like some kind of like crystal or something, or an upgrade on your crystal that, or your upgrade on your laser that does it. Just something cool. Because I think that'd be pretty sweet. Is if like you shot at something and all of a sudden your laser beam shoots like three different ways. But
got it?
just random cool shit. Not relevant to what we're talking about now. So I actually wanted to just start with asking some questions, so we can kind of figure out pathfinding. Is there a specific point where the bugs want to go? Do they have a priority list, or is it only one point where they're going to?
Well, right now it's one thing, but I didn't intend to keep it that way. So I can kind of explain a little bit. Like this may actually be easier to talk about in the code. So you're still with me now, right?
Yeah, we're looking at
Okay.
your code.
Let me uh if I can type. Um I actually have I I just drew out a diagram of the state machine for this thing. I don't know what I did with it because I erased it to do this activity. I should have left it open. Um, but I can still talk through it here in code form. So right now, the way it works is I'm hardwiring the target to be the player. I don't want that necessarily to always be the case. One of the things that I haven't added to the game yet, which is kind of like the main long-term goal of the campaign, so to speak, is that you're trying to recover these alien artifacts that are kind of tucked away in the wilderness. Um, and there's a specific way that I want you to have to collect them and bring them like back to your base, so they can be like warped out, which would set off a chain reaction that would cause like a really big wave of invasion or attack, because that's like kind of like the big difficulty spike in the game is you bring this thing that the bugs really want, or you're not entirely sure why they're attracted to it. It's kind of like the mystery of the whole thing. But most of the time, as the player, you're triggering them and they're attracted to you. But there is this concept of like there are other things in the environment that maybe you are hoarding behind your walls that they really want, and they will do what they have to do to like find their way to it. So I'm not trying to be like uber prescriptive and here's like the exact order of like what you want to attack. It's more like there's two or three primary targets that they may have. And then if there are things in between them and the thing that they want to get to, then the target will change to the thing that's blocking them, whether it be a wall or a tree or whatever.
Okay.
Does that answer your question?
Yeah. So eventually there'll be some kind of teleporter or something that's gonna be in your base that you have to have in order
Yeah.
to get these things off. Um, so
Um,
what I would envision is a priority list of, you can have the player on the top priority, but so long as you are like so far away from like if it's like top priority is the teleporter, unless it's so far away, then top priority is the player or something like that.
so you would turn the teleporter into like its primary target, like when certain conditions are met or something. Or you're saying like it would always try to target that, and if the player's like in close proximity to them, the player would like aggro them, and then they would
Yeah,
maybe peel off.
yeah, yeah. That being said, I mean, do you want like a base defense, or do you want like when you're out in the wild, like every night, do you want to go back to your base, or are you going to have, okay, well, I'm going to have the player as the priority mainly. You're not too worried about your base, and then you can go out and like build temporary outposts and stuff. I'm just trying to figure out if you're just building everything on your starting area, or if it's going to be like all over the place.
It's that's a really good question. It's the way I was thinking about it was definitely more the latter. So like to talk about an analogous experience, like no, that's not a good one. Oh, Fortnite. So like all three of us have played Fortnite, right? Like there's this idea that it's primarily a third-person shooter, but there's like a base building mechanic to it, and the people that excel at that game are able to like set up mobile fortifications like on the fly. So I kind of was envisioning they would have that kind of not in the beginning. In the beginning, I think the player is vastly overwhelmed by how hostile the planet is, and they just run back to the base. Like that's their safe haven. And eventually, if they progress and get better technologies, better defenses, then they can set up mobile outposts that are allow them to kind of like survive through the night, which is one of the caps on their ability to explore the planet early game, is that they can't just like run off in any direction and set up a totally different base and survive the night. Like in the beginning, they have to keep coming back, but eventually they get a little bit better about this whole survival thing, and they can set up mobile outposts in places where they're trying to collect certain kinds of resources that are farther away from their base.
Okay. And then with that answered, so you're gonna be able to build anywhere like eventually. Maybe you have to like get past the first, gather the first thing, get some more technology or whatever, but eventually you're able to build anywhere. Um, like, do you want it to be like Fortnite, where it's kind of just really quick, you can just pop everything up, or is there a printing time on a lot of stuff? Do you want to like have to take half a day to get your outpost set up, or is it going to be like if you just like in Age of Empires, if you watch the professionals, like they can quick wall and build like a really quick base around them just to like survive the quick moment and then just disassemble it later. Um, but what I wanted to know was, do the bugs spawn in specific spots, or are they spawned based on where the player's at?
Oh, I see. Yeah, that's a good question. I think it might be a mixture, but I'll show you kind of like how it works now. And it is based on base location, not necessarily based on where the player's at, but that's just because that's like how I have it set up for this crude demo. It most of the time will be based on where the player's at, because like I was describing earlier, I want them to have this like feeling of, oh shit, it's getting dark and I got really far away from my base. I better haul ass back because they're about to like surround me.
Hmm.
So right now, like the way it looks is this is my spawning object. So kind of waves just kind of like vomit out of it. Um, and if I turn on my grid here, like it'll be easier for me to explain how this works. Or actually here, the grid is on. I just don't have it set right. How big are these things? So this will show you like how big the biomes are, and then I can kind of explain this better. So this biome right here, If you can see can you see those white lines? Does that
Yeah.
register? So this is like the player's like starting biome, so to speak. If they were, let me go ahead and grab the dude too, because this will be fun. If let's say they went way out here, and there should be like more terrain out here, because I'm just kind of like playing around with this. Let's say they like made it all the way out here. So now what's happening, and I don't know why my grid reset. Uh, oh, actually, I put in the wrong numbers. But anyways, it'll still illustrate what I'm trying to do. So whenever night falls, that's whenever any spawners will spawn, I guess. Spawners spawn. It's a little redundant, but whatever. You know what I mean.
Yeah.
It will be based on the a grid position or the biome position of the player. So if I'm here and night falls, there's a random roll that I'll do on all of these tiles all the way around them. So that way, if I start beelining it back to my base, there's a percent chance that I'm going to run straight into a wall of enemies, and I'm not super strong on my own without my base. So that's a really good way to wipe. Is to like not know how to set up mobile fortifications or protect yourself when it gets dark when you're far away, or basically like spending too much time away from your base when it's getting dark and you're kind of like get greedy and you want to like get a few more things to get more juice out of the day. um, you can get trapped because they mostly spawn around you.
Okay. So if you're really far out, you don't actually have to worry about your base getting attacked. Like if you could technically build an outpost and defend it for that night, if you're, far enough away from your base, they won't spawn near it.
Right, unless you're in the artifact scenario, which I haven't programmed yet, but that's the only exception as
Okay.
far as what I have for now.
So if that's the case, then I don't. Sorry, I wanted to get the idea of all that before I kind of figured out
No,
how
you're good. You're good.
pathfinding. So if that's the case, then a big elaborate maze isn't really important until you get to that, artifact scenario where it's just massive.
Right.
Um, I actually like the third option with the laser walls. Um, being able, like, saying, like, maybe the player can't pass through them, they have to turn them off to get out and turn them back on before they, like, leave or something like that is just cool to me for some reason. And then, like, trying to repair, like, that one um, obelisk feels, like, frantic because, oh my God, they're swarming it. And I don't have anything, like, killing anything near it, so I'm, like, repairing it and just praying it doesn't go down.
Oh, so you kind of like the you like the like 3B flavor where it's like the enemy won't just mindlessly run through the laser. Like if there's something in the way, they may run into it first and then they'll get a little damage and then they'll be like, "Oh, what caused me damage?" and then go attack like one of the pillars.
I would just make it like a hard wall until the obelisk goes down and then like it
Oh,
disappears.
so they'll just totally ignore it.
Yeah,
It's not
it's
it's
like
not like a damage thing at all.
no, it'd just be like a hard wall area. It's interesting because then your pathfinding is really different from every other because you're not like it's less pathfinding and more like trying to find out where they're coming from and what they'll swarm. You're not building a
Hmm.
maze really.
Right.
You're just it's more holding on like that Starship Troopers where it's just they're coming from all sides and you're just trying to defend what's getting hit the most.
Right. Or maybe they come up like they have the ability to spawn on the same tile as you or like in your base. They might even end up like behind the walls.
Hmm. Um, and it feels less it feels more flimsy and less like I've got this elaborate awesome maze. They're gonna just gotta file through it and die along the way. It's
Yeah.
more of I have to be there and watch it and like kill the crap that's coming towards it and build defenses and like I'm actively defending as opposed to building a whole maze and towers and passively letting everything get dealt with.
Yeah, because at that point, like the experience is definitely skewing very heavily towards like you're designing a tower defense like game
Yeah, which
instead of
if you're going for that, yeah, then this option is the worst one. You're looking for that, creating that base layout that's important, um, and just having that passively take care of everything. Then yeah, the other options are better, but this one kind of contributes or causes the player to play in a different way, and the game to
Hmm.
feel different.
Yeah.
Also, I'm assuming all do bugs stay after the morning?
I haven't really decided that yet. They do for now. One of the ideas that I had was eventually the waves would become like progressively more difficult, and it may be the case that you've invested more in defensive structures over like attacking defending structures, if, if that makes sense. You know what I mean? It's like you were pretty good at the keep away game, but you didn't kill everything. So when the sun comes up, I wanted the bugs to have a behavior that like felt natural. Like, why did they come out at night to begin with? Because they're nocturnal or something. So what I think eventually I want to do, though I haven't, it doesn't work this way yet, is that they kind of like the sun comes up, and if they're still exposed, they'll like burrow into the ground and then like
Mhm.
disappear.
Uh, what else did I have to say? Oh, will you ever be able to interact with bug spawns? Like, is there going to be a nest or something you can deal with?
Right now, you can't. Originally, I had it set up that way where it was kind of like Factorio style, right? Where there's like a nest spawner really far away. And if you try to assault it early game, like you're going to get overwhelmed and it's going to murder you. So like you can find it and you can eventually take it out, but like not to start with. I haven't fully thrown that idea in the trash. The way I have it right now is that it's just totally random. So like they show up, they're not destructible objects. You can't like scout out and find all the places where the bugs are coming from and shut them off, because I think that's gonna that starts to lend itself to a different kind of like exploration field than what I think I want. So for now, until I have a good reason, I think they're just going to show up randomly and disappear as the same way they came. Like just when the sun comes up, they're gone. The hole closes.
Okay. So if that's the case, then the guard tower is probably a good option because if you've got this elaborate maze you're building with like these walls and it's all about the pathfinding, if you're sitting on top of a spawner, then your maze is just screwed because they'll just spawn all around. Whereas in the watchtower, you've got some time to clear out what's spawned inside and then deal with the stuff outside, which is cool to me. But I've been talking a bunch. Mike, do
No,
you have
you're
any
good.
input?
Well, I wanted to say one thing to that, and then yeah, let's talk to Mike for a bit. I do have, and I've been kind of like teetering on whether or not I want it to be an MVP mechanic or not, or I guess I should say MVG now. I don't know, whatever. You know what I'm talking about. Minimum viable, whatever. Um, to have a structure that was kind of like an impact hammer, and basically it makes it so that there can't be spawn points that generate within like a certain radius of it. So you could try to defend your base from internal attacks that way, and that wouldn't be a problem for the player until like much later in the game. Like I wouldn't make that be like their first experience building walls. I would want it to be kind of like a surprise where it's like, oh man, that thing showed up. Like, is there anything I can research to like prevent that from happening? Oh, okay, like seismic hammer. Let me get that.
Cool. What you got, Mike? You are currently
Uh,
muted.
I, I, this might be a stupid question, but to you, Jake, why is pathfinding important? Like, what are you getting out of it, or what do you want the player to get out of it?
Yeah, I know. I don't think that's a stupid question. I think originally the reason why I thought it was important was because um, if I'm the player and I'm playing this kind of game, one of the things that I'm looking for experience wise, or at least like that itch I'm trying to scratch, is I want to have this sense of kind of like creative authorship over like the design of this base. And because it's not the type of game like Stardew Valley where there's all this like cosmetic stuff that you can do to spruce up your farm, so to speak, like you get really nice lamps, or like you get, potted flowers, or like whatever,
Mm-hmm.
crystal walkways, like you that sense of like you're designing something that's unique, and you feel like you put something together that's kind of like a game in and of itself, is like the design of your base. Like I started to feel like if you didn't have something where you were trying to kind of like design the enemy's pathfinding, you were going to lose out on some of those like motivations for why people like to play tower defense type games, is because it's kind of like, oh well, like I get to figure out what combination of turrets and like what types of choke points and like what order to place things in results in like my own unique like way to solve the problem of the fact that bug attacks are overwhelming and I can't like just do it with my laser beam, you know?
Uh-huh. So yeah, what you guys were talking about, I was thinking more along the lines of what pathfinding would do. And I was also like wondering if it's going to be a spawn, like just like they spawn. I'm guessing they spawn near you mostly at night. And I was thinking, and how's that really going to like affect how you would build your base? So like you would basically, if it was spawning, you would basically have to build your base like just like a normal base where you would have four walls with guard towers, the gate, everything like that. And then like you couldn't, like, let's say if you were in the bottom corner, of the map, and you were like trying to build your base in that corner, you had like trees on the bottom, the southern part, and then
Right.
you just build one wall up in the very top and try kind of like maybe corner it off. That doesn't really help you because I'm guessing that they're still going to be able to spawn inside the base. Or is that not correct? Like if it's big enough, let's say if the wall, let's say it's outside your screen, and then you go down to the farther south side of it, try to get wood or something, and then a whole bunch of bugs just spring out. Um, so it kind of, I think, limits the way you're going to be able to pathfind or build your base. It's always going to be a box. If you go out into the wilderness, I would build a box around almost everywhere that I think I'm going to get bum rushed. Or if I think there's a good chance there might be a lot of bugs somewhere, I'm going to put basically a fort. And then you're going to have like your main fort, obviously, but then you're going to have like smaller like bases all around where you can kind of just run to. Um, I feel like I don't know if that's good or bad. I don't really know. I would have to test it out. But I feel like if, let's say, kind of like the Factorino, or I can't even think
Victoria.
of
Factorio. Yeah, I
there we
got
go,
you.
Factorio, there we go. Like that, where they are predetermined at start at runtime,
Right.
uh, and there's also smaller nests everywhere,
Mm.
and then they get bigger and bigger as the game goes on. I feel like that might have a little bit better, where you can then kill off, like, let's say, the southern portion, know that you've killed off all the bugs there, so then you can just build one wall, or you just know it's safe, to actually operate there. I don't know if that's if you want to have the sense of like danger all the time, like nowhere is safe type thing, or if you want to have it where if someone strategically like takes off like some area, like if it's like really lucrative in like a resource gathering area,
Right.
and they want to basically make sure it's it's going to be safe, um, then they start killing everything around it and making sure it's very well defended.
Yeah, I
Uh,
get you. I like that. I like how you kind of lay that out for Factorio, kind of like what that experience is and what it does. I think if I'm comparing what I'm trying to do in the spectrum is like how that works in Factorio and how it works in something that we've also played together, Deep Rock Galactic. I'm definitely leaning way closer to what it feels like in Deep Rock Galactic, like constant
okay.
threat and kind of like pressure, and this idea that you can kind of like design away some of your threat by kind of like saying, well, I don't have to worry about the south side of the map is not something I'm necessarily going for a variety of reasons. I think one of the big ones is because my game world is probably not going to be anywhere near as big as Factorio's, um, and
That's
because
true.
of that, it kind of like constrains like how I do those kinds of things. Because what I would not want is to run into a lot of balancing issues where it's like, oh well, now the dominant strategy is to spend the first half of the game just going out and killing all the bug nests,
Hmm.
and then you just like have these huge lulls between when you're collecting those artifacts and like when you're actually getting attacked. Like I want there to constantly be this cycle of
I
you
thought
get it.
the in the early game you wouldn't be able to go out of the base very far. I thought that was the kind of like the constraint. Like you wouldn't be able to
That's
run
true.
out there and kill everything.
That's
Like
true.
that's I would say that there would be like some kind of balancing issue you would have to do in the beginning where that couldn't happen. Where you would and you wouldn't know exactly where those nests are either. You'd have to kind of go searching for them.
Yeah.
But then again, yeah, I do see your point on the balancing issue though.
I would like to say that all of these, now that we have a bunch of this stuff kind of in our heads, I would say just go with like the plain Jane like stuff, just the wall, and see how you feel about like the old school like almost like a sanctum kind of vibe where it's just like a hard wall. They're gonna have to do the maze. Just see how it feels, and then we've got thoughts and options on other stuff too.
Yeah, there's still I don't think that one by itself is kind of a non-starter unless I also decide that I'm going to refactor like how the laser works. Um, so I think really what I have in my head at this point is let me zoom out here a little bit so I can actually speak to the things that I'm showing. I think one is out for me. I've actually done one before. Like that was the first thing that I ever built for this game way back in the day, if you guys can even remember. Um, was like a legacy wall type setup, and enemies would have this concept of like this is before they actually had like true pathfinding with like the A star algorithm, and they just did like a potential step thing to like walk towards a general area until they ran into something solid, and then they would get pissed off and like chew on the solid thing until it disappeared. So like I kind of did it way back then, um, and it didn't feel bad. It also didn't really feel like it didn't really feel all that interesting. And at that time, the player still had a gun. So it felt a lot better for them to be like shooting over walls. But now with this laser, I don't like number one. Um, I think one has some potential, um, but it's also starts to feel like I should have a gun. I feel like I should justify that or explain that in some way. I kind of can't. It's like something about that design feels like the player should have a gun. Um, and I'm just not sure if I want to go there. I'm pretty sure I'm not going to go there. So of the ideas that are on here, the ones that I like was well, I liked three for some of the reasons that you already said, Ryan, and I kind of liked Mike your suggestion, which was kind of like a marriage of I think it was kind of like one and two, where it's like more like a chain link fence that you can shoot through. Um, might actually be okay. But I think the one that I'm actually thinking is probably the cheapest to start with is probably number 3, honestly. Let me think about that. The question that 3 won't answer is, does controlling enemy pathfinding make the experience for the player more compelling? Not necessarily, like it could be set up with like that B option where like they attack the columns. Um, but it'll definitely be skewing away from like the more traditional like tower defense vibes.
Are, are those not repairable, or are you going to have it repairable?
You could repair them. You could repair like the fence posts. These parts here.
Mhm.
I mean, you could always I mean, you could just make the obelisk non-targetable, and then it acts just like a wall.
I feel like I don't know if you want to actually have upgrades, but like the lasers would take more power than the chain link fence or something
Yep.
along those lines.
You would have to route. You wouldn't have to route power to every segment of your wall. You would have to route power to every post. So there is something kind of interesting there about like, how am I going to lay this out if I want to have like, your base needs to have room to grow, right?
Uh
Um,
huh.
so you're going to run into this like, and this is a big issue in like designing your base in Factorio, right? Because you start and everything's on top of each other, and then eventually you try to scale up, and it's like, oh shit, I have no room to add this additional like step in the work in the process I need.
Right.
So you end up at some point like basically redesigning it. So one of the things that I no matter what, um, I feel like I want to keep this idea that um, at any point the player can decide to destroy something that they built, and if that thing has no damage on it, then they get all of the resources back. So that you can go through a lot of different iterations on like how you want to lay things out. Like I could just build a furnace, decide later that that's not a good place for that furnace, destroy it, get the resources back, and then go build it in a new spot. Grumble. Maybe not. Maybe you only get half.
I mean, 100% is fine. Just play test it, and if it,
Yeah.
I mean, I'm pretty good at finding out how to break things, so I'm here to
Yeah.
test it, and
I think we're getting kind of away from it too. I'm definitely
yeah.
starting to feel like my gut is telling me 3, and maybe like I'm not really solving a problem that I need to solve. And there may be like, it may just be more interesting to like invest more time and energy and thought into like, there's different kinds of enemies, and the defenses that you have like turret wise are just not super effective against those enemies, or like you need some combination of like turrets to be effective against certain waves. And all of that is like kind of dependent, but not necessarily like 100% dependent on like traditional like tower defense walls and
Uh,
mazes, so to speak.
how difficult coding wise is it going to be to be able to tell or turn off the ability for bugs to attack the obelisks? Because if you have that easily toggleable, you can test both. Because if
But
it's like it's just a regular wall if you turn it off, and if you turn it on, then it's how you laid it
but I
out.
mean, if they can't damage it, then how do they ever get in?
Like you can go back to if there's no path for them to do it. Like you don't have to lay it out like that. Like just take away the section on the left and think of it like a tunnel, and then you just you build like a maze with the laser things. It's just like a normal wall, and then you can just have them attack the wall or something if it's or start to attack the obelisk if there's no path in. I don't know coding wise how difficult that is, but you could test both your ideas.
That wouldn't be too hard. It's like the point that Mike's bringing up is, what should the fail state be for pathfinding? So if I'm the enemy and there's no way to breach the walls, if I'm not attacking the post or the obelisk, Really should come up with a standard name for this thing. I'm just going to call it a laser post. Um, if there's no way for me to attack if there's no way for me as the bug to get inside the base, my options are attack the thing that's preventing me from getting in, which would be one of the posts, like basically dismantle part of the fence.
Hmm.
Or I'm going to like, hey, I'm a tunneling bug, like I tunneled up from the ground. It stands to reason I would be able to tunnel down and come back up on the other side. So there's something there about like I feel like if we do go with option three, it just makes logical sense to me that if they can't find, they will optimize for, can I just ignore the fence? Is there a way to just get to the player without having to fuck with the fence? And if not, what's the shortest path to get to the player? And what fence is in the way of me getting to them? Okay, now that's my target. Like that kind of becomes the really simple logic to build and test is like, do I have a path? Okay, no, what should I attack instead of the thing I want to attack?
Hmm.
And we'll just go from there.
Yeah.
So you want them to snake, like have an opening in your base and just snake it so that you're basically having them go through like a maze, like Ryan said, and then you just basically build a whole bunch of towers along there and you kill them off before they get to the base. Is that kind of how you envision it? Because seems like that's what would happen is that you would basically make a hole in your base and make it is just like zigzag a whole bunch of lasers or anything like that, and then they're going to go through your maze,
Uh-huh.
and it really would take away. I mean, depending on you know if you don't get overrun, I guess, but
Well, that's my
if you make it
suggestion.
long enough, obviously, then they may never ever get in to your base.
My suggestion was just if you do it this way, you can test both. You can test having the snaking maze and like a traditional tower defense, or you could test, having the targetable obelisks, laser posts. Sorry, and then feeling like having to defend a small area that's surrounded by laser posts.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, okay. I think I'm understanding now. Like based on what Mike's saying and now circling back to your comment, it's like Um, the way I was describing it is step one is find a hole. If you have a hole, then stick with your target, which would create the scenario that you're describing, Mike, where it's just like the player is now basically set up to just like design a big snake maze.
Yeah.
Um, if we take that away, which is I think what you're saying, Ryan, it's like easy to turn that off and on. But if we take it away, and they're not going to try to find a hole, they're always going to try to find shortest path. Then it's like, okay, if this is the shortest path, like what is between me and my target based on what would be my shortest path? Okay, there's three things blocking it. I'm just going to attack those things systematically until like I'm in proximity of like what I'm trying to attack.
Yeah.
So they'll ignore the hole in scenario B.
I like
Um,
that. I think
yeah.
that would be more
I
chaos.
mean, that would also let you wouldn't have a hole and you would just block everything.
Well, yeah, I like that way. Just well, I mean, I would have to play it, but I feel like
That
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 would
one
be the
is
most that would be the
yeah
most chaotic because you could get obviously there's going to be a lot of bugs on the map and they could hit you from different angles, and then you might not be able to be there in all of them, so you have to make it sure you're you're fortified in all areas.
And
yeah
And
I mean, I want to say thematically, just having like this horde of bugs coming at you with this tiny ass laser wall that you're hoping doesn't fail feels pretty fun.
yeah,
It's just like, oh god, I
I
hope
did.
this
I was
holds.
like, I was hanging on the end of that sentence. I was like, how is he gonna finish that? He's gonna be like, that feels like dog shit.
That is how I usually describe things. He's got me there. But no, no, that feels like you're like, oh my god, this laser wall has to hold or I'm screwed. So you're like repairing crap and like placing turrets and hold like I don't know, maybe
Yeah,
possibly
yeah,
refilling
yeah.
ammunition, and it's just. So that's
It's a
one scenario.
Mike's descriptor, like the chaos. Like I love this idea of nighttime is terrifying and chaotic, and then daytime is like the leisurely, like go and get your chores done, and then make sure you get home before dark. There's just something about that, like back and forth, that I'm really interested in exploring no matter what we pick here. So I'm pretty excited about that idea. And I think to answer your question, Ryan, it wouldn't be hard. It would be kind of trivial, famous last words, to A/B that. I think that would be pretty easy.
Yeah. So kind of how I imagine it feeling a little bit with the day-night cycle and having access to walls and stuff. I mean, I think you can do that and don't starve.
But the only thing that it comes up is if you pick number 3 though, your lasers, if they can't hit the lasers and only the power post or whatever you want to call them, uh, that means that it kind of limits the areas that could be attacked. So something to think about. I I still think it'd be kind of cool to have it where you don't know exactly where they're going to attack. They could attack anywhere, and you need to have your defenses up everywhere, instead of just in certain spots where you could over fortify and make it kind of
Well,
trivial.
I think Jake is currently on the mindset of having the actual laser wall attackable.
Oh, okay. Well, yeah, that's the if it's attackable, then yeah.
I think that was my understanding.
For sure, yeah. I mean, we can start it that way. Um,
Like the whole wall, not just the posts, right? Like the corner posts.
no, just the corner posts, but like we can set, and this is also something that we can like test out and see how it feels. But like it can't be an infinite like expanse of laser. Like there should be a max distance that it will project before it has to hit another post. So instead of it being like, because the game is based on a 32 pixel grid, right? So
Yeah.
instead of like having every cell that the wall is on be an attackable like integrity point, I guess is what I'm trying to say. We could set it up so that the posts are attackable, and then you're trying to kind of like situate your turrets around the places where you know they're going to attack. But it's not going to be like this, like mile long distance between post to post. It's going to look more like a traditional fence where it's like here's a segment, here's a segment, here's a segment. You
Okay.
know what I mean?
Yeah, I
Um,
know what you're talking about.
on a cool idea kind of thing, I this is probably a pain in the ass to code. You could have it. So imagine they're force fields, and they're attackable, and they have a certain amount of HP. And the longer your segment is, the more that HP is spread out. And once one goes down, the whole thing fails. So if you do build it a mile wide, it takes like one bug attack, and the whole thing fails.
Oh,
Hmm.
But
interesting.
if you wanted to make it like stronger, you could do like a one tower here or one post here, and then a post like two
How
cells
would you
away, and then that would be a really strong wall. But expense wise, it's going to cost a ton of resources to put that
how would
post down.
you show that to the player that that's the way it is? Most people are probably
Um,
not going to be able to pick up
like
on
a
the fact that
like a
if you go
thickness,
longer.
you could make the
Yeah.
actual like laser look thicker the stronger it is, and weak like thinner the weaker it is. This is just spitballing here. This definitely is more of a pain in the ass. But if you don't like the way it feels, once you do design it, that's an option you could go to change it. I
Sure.
wouldn't
Cool.
go baseline. Doing his thing, so I'm just filling the air.
Yeah, no, I mean you can feel free to fill the dead air. I can also kind of like explain more about what I'm doing now. I'm kind of like moving on to number 3, and what I'm doing is I'm trying to just design some like really crude posts that we can use to prototype this without worrying too much about
Oh,
exactly how they look.
we're
But I am
drawn now.
taking into consideration like the actual aesthetic of it obviously doesn't matter at this point, but it does matter to know mechanically, like does it fill up two cells in the grid, or is it like two cells tall and one cell wide, which is what I'm doing here, which would kind of like change how it's implemented. So that's just like a explanation of why I'm doing this the way I'm doing it when it doesn't really matter that much. And what we'll have to do is, if it can only move, and this is where if I had paper, I would start drawing, but I'm not going to be able to do that on camera, so I'll kind of just explain it. I really need like a second camera so that I can like point it down at like a sketch pad or something. Would be pretty cool.
That kind of
Future
just looks like
ideas.
you drew the middle finger towards us as well.
Yeah, yeah. What this is what I think of all your ideas. Sorry, what was I? Oh, we're gonna need it. Assuming that it can the wall can only be positioned at 90-degree angles. That means that our sprite sheet is going to be 4 different images potentially. Or I guess it wouldn't matter if we just like debug it with drawing lines. That's definitely the cheaper way to do it. Never mind. We're not going to do it in the sprite. We're going to like do it more expensively in GameMaker. But just so that I have like some semblance of like what this object is here, I'm going to do like some really minor shading on this thing. Because that will impact your opinion, believe it or not.
My opinion is that this is the most beautiful laser post I've ever seen.
Just, yeah, well, yeah. How many laser posts you seen, bro? Like, there we go. That's our laser post. And we'll just go into structures and we'll call this, what did you call it, Mike? A power tower? That's it. That's the name now. You just named it. I hope you like that name.
You can also do fence post.
Nope, power tower.
Fence post. Yeah. That'll really get people excited to be like, yes, I finally unlocked fence post. Amazing.
What was it? God, what was No Man's Sky, where it was like the most basic shit you had to
Oh yeah,
unlock?
like wall. Yeah, you just unlocked wall. That's
unlocked-
honestly how I felt when I was picking this topic earlier today. I'm like, what's something interesting I can talk to Mike and Ryan about? And the best thing I could come up with was walls. Like, we're gonna talk about walls today. But hey, walls are exciting in tower defense games, so
Totally.
don't knock it. So now I'm gonna do some, just to make this more interesting. While I do this, I'm gonna kind of explain how this works. So, and this all got reorganized with the latest version of GameMaker. So I kind of have to like think about what I'm doing here. So the way that all of this works is that GameMaker has kind of like this hybrid interface where part of it is a like design tool where you can lay out like rooms and like have an image editor and stuff like that, and the other part of it is just like a code editor. So what I'm doing right now is I just created that sprite in Sprite, which is typically what I use for creating pixel art, and then I'm going to come down here into I'm inside my sprites folder, and inside of structures I'm going to create a new sprite and call it SPR power tower, and make sure I spell it right. Oh, I already have something called a power tower.
Is it a tower that provides power to the base?
That can't be true. No way. I'm gonna come in here and be like, I already did all this, and I just forgot. No.
No, it's probably like an old school. Whenever you're working with power pylons.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, well, let's just.
Well, you did have one in there. Legacy? Go back to your legacy one.
You saw it in here?
Yeah. It was in there.
Power plates.
It's the one.
Power tower.
Power tower. Oh, this was whenever I was designing puzzles. This was like an alien artifact puzzle.
Dude, that's your power tower right there.
Yeah, it looks gorgeous.
It doesn't.
Yeah.
It doesn't look too bad, right?
Yeah.
So on this episode, I'm gonna show you a bunch of stuff I already made.
This is what happens when you work on a game for too long, man. You just like you keep designing over yourself.
Dude, he even named it right.
Yeah, even I was sitting here being like, oh, there's just something about power tower that sounds so good to me. Yeah, because I already came up with it. Anyways, fuck it. That's our power tower. So ignore
All
what I
right.
did in A-Spread
Oh,
because I already did this. That was like the crude version. This is me spending more time on it than I would have spent if I was doing this in a prototype format. So I will say that I would not sit down and design it this way if I hadn't like prototyped it first. End end rant. Um, that probably means that there's an object that already exists for this too. Power. No, we didn't. We didn't make it that far. I'm pretty sure I did though. I might have deleted it in the Great Purge. Um, or maybe I just called it Tower. I'm pretty sure it doesn't exist. We're gonna make it from scratch. Um, so now that I've got that sprite that already existed, ha ha ha, I'm gonna go into objects and I'm gonna go into my structures because this is a player structure. And I'm going to, hold on a second. I have to think about this. We don't want to make it from scratch. We want it to have some of the logic that the structure, that parent structure has. So I think what we're actually going to do is we're going to find the thing that's closest to it uh, with these child objects, which would be, um, I'm pretty sure this one. Yeah, we're going to go with this one. So I'm going to make a copy of OBJ Century, and I'll explain why I'm doing it this way. And I'm going to change this to OBJ Power Tower, and I'm going to come into it real quick. And this is the, actually, I'll talk about this in a second. Let me just change this sprite real quick so I'm not distracting myself. Tower. Okay. Um, so we've created this structure, power tower. We duplicated it from the laser turret that you saw at the demo at the beginning. The reason why I did that is because one of the cool things about GameMaker is that it forces you to think about the objects in your game in a way where they're like inheriting as much code from a parent as possible. So if you're familiar with the concept of like a Russian nesting doll, the idea is that you've got this big doll and then you take the head of it off and then inside of it is another smaller doll and take the head of that off. Like it works that way. And when we talk about parent child, like the parent is the bigger doll and then inside you have the smaller doll, which is a child, and then it has a child and it has a child. In code, when we talk about inheritance, the idea is that things that are children inherit certain qualities from their parents. And GameMaker has a pretty cool way that you can set that up so that you don't have basically to write a redundant code in a lot of different places. And it makes it so that whenever you do refactors of things, which you will inevitably do, that you're not having to go around to like 64 different object instances and like change the logic of something that they all do similarly every time you do a refactor. So this object is already a child of OBJ structure's parent. It inherits its in step event and its destroy event. The end step event is kind of like this. It may be special to GameMaker, I'm not sure, but there's this concept that objects will run a certain block of code every frame of the game, which is in GameMaker language is called a step. The end step is basically saying like run all of the main functions of all of the objects in the room. Then there's a special step called the end step that's just like the step event, only it runs after the main step. So it's going to inherit that. It's going to inherit its destroy event, which is what happens when the structure is destroyed. So in this case, the way it works right now is the player gets all the resources back, and all the structures behave that way. Then we get into the more interesting stuff with how this works is if I open up the create event for our power tower here, which is duplicated from that other thing we were talking about, you'll see that the first line of actual like non-commented code here is event inherited, which means that it's going to say, find all of the stuff that we defined in the create event for the parent object, do all that stuff first, and then do all this stuff after you've grabbed those values. And that's why I've kind of labeled the header here overrides, because what I'm doing in a lot of these instances with these variables is that there's a default value that the parent has that the child inherits. And then I come in and I add more values that are specific to this object, and I override things that are special for this particular object. So here, because this is based on an old tower, we're going to go through and we're going to basically kind of like comb this and find the things that are relevant and keep them. And then we're going to remove the stuff that doesn't matter because it's not applicable to this particular object type. So we've got sprites and depth. All this stuff is pretty straightforward. Image speed is 1, which doesn't matter because we only have one image frame here. X and Y offset is still useful because that actually lines up perfectly, because the way that I was using that is that determines the origin point of where the laser beam comes out of the defense turrets. So we can use that exact same logic for building these fences, only instead of them being, you know, like targeting enemies, they'll be like rotatable where it can point up, right, down, or left. So we'll leave that as an origin point. Active reset buffer max. We don't need this. This was a way that we would reduce some of the cost of how often that the sentry turret was like checking for a new target. The fence is not looking for a new target, so we can get rid of this. We can keep is built. We can keep generates power. HP small. We might actually want to change that. I'm going to say HP medium. So in the parent object, I have like basically a t-shirt sizing of different HP pools right now. So that way I'm not coming in and using a bunch of magic numbers for the health of different structures. And what I mean by magic numbers is if I came in here and I said HP max equals like 72, like that's a magic number and it's not pointing to anything else in my game. So unless I remember that 72 health means medium, like I could have all kinds of like random shit for the health of all of my structures. So I defined like categories of health that I can fine tune later. We're going to set this one to medium. So a little bit more than the towers themselves. They're beefier than the towers. Is built HP. This whole line doesn't matter. This is just for like debugging. If I want to put stuff in the room and have it so that it's already built, just so I can test the behavior and like go through more dev cycles quicker. Makes or uses power is true. We want to turn that on. This is the line of code in the parent object that checks to see if it's connected to a power tile that has power. So we definitely want to keep that. Is powered is going to be false because it doesn't generate power. So it's going to start out unpowered and then look for a connecting plate at its base to give it power. Makes oxygen is false because it's not an oxygen pump. Its energy usage is interesting. I think for now we'll call it a 1. That's how much juice it's pulling from the grid. And I didn't really go over the actual like grid logic when I was doing the demo earlier, but the way it works is that you can set up as many different like connected grid systems of power plates as you want, and those tiles know which structures are generating power and feeding it through those lines, so to speak. So what this is doing is whenever it tries to power up, it's going to check to see if there's enough available power on the grid that it's connected to by subtracting 1 from the total power. And if it doesn't have enough power, it will stay offline. Interactions is interactive is true. We're going to need to turn that on because I think whenever these towers are placed, we're going to want the player to be able to like toggle them, like rotate them or reposition them. We could make it so that they have to make that choice before placing the structure, but I feel like that would kind of suck if you wanted to redesign something on the fly. And also it's a lot of additional code complexity that like probably isn't worth it at this point. So we're going to go with the player has the ability once it's placed in the room to change the direction in which the laser is pointing. Targeting, it doesn't have a target. It doesn't have a target range. We may just like rename this category to something that's more applicable. So we can just say, just call it range. It can have like a certain like max distance. So we could say like the maximum range that the laser or that the fence could travel ignoring Ryan's super awesome idea that the longer the laser is, the less powerful it is. We're going to ignore that for now and just kind of like cap it at a max range. We'll go with like 128, which is a magic number. I'm aware that I'm violating my own rules, but fuck it. Target buffer max, and this doesn't matter. So we'll keep the max range. We don't need a min range. No, we don't need a min. We don't need a min range. Damage. That one is if we want them to be able to run into the fence. That might actually be useful, but I don't think we're going to do that to start. So let's just go ahead and take all that out. Sound. Eventually we can mess with sound. I'm not super worried about that right now. It doesn't really change like our ability to test this idea. And then set the collision base for the structure. This is some pretty like esoteric stuff that's specific to something about how my game works that I'm not going to explain in detail, but basically what's happening here is I'm trying to determine like where the collision base is for the structure so that enemies know like where they can walk. So we'll say that the y offset is 0, and then the width and height of the base is 1, and it's saying 1 grid cell, which is a 32 by 32. So it's basically saying that the base of this thing is 32 by 32 pixels. And actually the offset is 1 because the height of this thing is 64. So we're going to go down 1 cell, and then the base of it is a 32 by 32. I just said I wasn't going to explain it, but I did it anyways. So there you go. Step event. And let's make this a little bigger. I bet this is kind of hard for y'all to see. I don't know if I'm actually going to be able to zoom in on this thing. I used to know how to do that. How hard is this to read? Can you see any of this stuff? Okay. If it becomes problematic for whatever reason, I can try to figure out how to fix it. So here in the step event, like I was describing earlier, the step is like what happens every frame. This again, we duplicated this from the prismatic tower that was like shooting the laser beams. So it's going to inherit the step event from the parent, which we still wanted to do. And this code is stinky. So I'm going to do this, ignore that. Yeah, so we're going to keep some of the skeleton here is useful. We'll keep that. I think we're going to gut all of this. Yeah, we're going to gut all of this. So what we've got here, just to start with, is our tower shouldn't do anything if it's not built and it doesn't have power. So whenever we place it in the world, it's going to be that green silhouette like all the other structures because that's how the parent object works. And it's not. It shouldn't be like shooting a laser fence that the player can move around until it's built and it has power. So we're first going to check for that. And then the next thing that we're going to check is we're going to need to check what angle it's currently facing. So we'll set that up first, and then we'll figure out how we want the player to interact with it so they can change the angle. So to start out with, what I typically do for stuff like this is I'll just hardwire an angle so I can make sure that the logic is working without player interaction, and then I'll figure out how to come back and add the player interaction. So for now, we'll say var dir, which is short for direction, equals 0. And the reason why I'm putting 0 is because at least it works this way in Game Maker. If you, hold on, this is important. Otherwise, everything else that I do will be kind of nonsense.
While you're working on that, I do want to say a couple of things.
Yeah, sure.
So, one, whenever you were explaining parent-child relationships, that's actually all the problems I'm having right now with my board game because I'm doing everything in Photoshop, and I have templates for all my cards. But
Oh, yeah. You need
you
smart
can't.
objects, my man.
Yeah, I need to do that. But
Yeah, we can talk about that sometime.
is that how you like make it to where you all the values will change on all the copies of it?
Yes and no. Like, there's different ways to use smart objects. There's a really good video I can link you later on where a guy explains it really well. But
Yeah, because I'm like, if I build out more cards of this, I'm gonna pull my hair out. Because anytime I change something on the base template, I'm gonna have to change all my cards. But I'm like brand new to Photoshop, so
yeah, yeah, we can definitely explore that together. We can figure that out.
yeah.
Um,
So a short explanation of parent-child relation or parent-childs are just like templates, to where you're just carrying over everything.
uh, yeah, 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 yeah. You can think about it that way. Um, yeah.
And then also for the so we're thinking on the power tower. Is it only shooting one direction?
No, that's what I'm about to explain. Did you have another question
I
before
meant
I
like,
answer that one?
is it gonna come out and like, are you gonna have? Can it create four different beams, or is it only creating one beam?
Only one beam.
Only one beam. Okay. All right, that's all I go. Go for it.
Um, okay. It's not gonna work because it's white. Oh my god, that's amazing. I'm like, check this out. Okay, now I have to turn this off.
We're gonna see. Oh God, here come the anime.
Uh, oh yeah, this is where I flash my anime background for sure. Let's see, choose virtual background. Let's just turn it off for a second. Um, there we go. Now you can actually see this. Can you see this?
We can
It's gonna
see
be
that.
backwards though. Fuck. Well, anyways, you can see it. So, what we need to do, because this beam can point in one of four directions, is whenever you work in degrees with GameMaker in terms of like the direction something is pointing, like 360 degrees, like what angle is it pointing at? Your cardinal directions are 0, 90, 180, and 270. The way GameMaker works is that whenever you're pointing directly to the right, so you're pointing this away, that number is 0/360. So what we're doing here is if we want our sprite to, or sorry, our animation or whatever we're working on to kind of work or play nice with a lot of the game maker logic, like they default a lot of stuff to work where the starting angle is 90 degrees. So we're actually going to put 0 in our code here um, because that means we're pointing straight to the right, and I can talk more about that later. But that's why that number is 0. It's a degree. It's not like the type of values that we've been seeing thus far. So we're going to start pointing to the right, and what we're going to do is we're going to write this out and in some pseudocode. And I'll put in a lot of comments here, and like I'll get it wrong and I'll have to come back and erase it. Whatever, it's fine. So what I'll say is like for testing, default direction right. Um, and these need to be comments instead of that. And the next thing I need to do is this block eventually will evolve into the thing that determines what angle it needs to be pointing. So then the next block needs to be about what do I do whenever it's pointing a specific direction. So I'm actually going to define a region here, which I'm going to keep my promise. I'm not actually going to explain what this is because it's probably pretty obvious what I'm doing. I'm going to say point laser in direction facing. So up here, eventually this will turn into how the player interacts with it and chooses a direction. Here is what we do once we know what the direction is. So what I'm actually going to set up here is I'm going to set up what's called a switch statement. So I'll say switch, and inside of this switch, I'll put direction. So right now it's always going to be 0. Eventually it can be other things. And the way a switch statement works in GameMaker and also other languages is that it's kind of like a special kind of like it's a special way to put a bunch of conditions inside of like one block of code. So we know that the direction is set to something. Each of the 4 ways that it can be set could be called a case. Like in case of it pointing right, do this. In case of it pointing top, do this. In case of it pointing left, do this. So what we're going to do is we're going to say switch based on what case it is, do this code. So we'll write case, and then we'll write in case the direction is 0. Trying to remember the syntax on this. That might be wrong. We'll find out eventually. And it's getting late here. We're definitely not going to finish this tonight. We'll see how far we can get. Do you guys have a hard stop?
You know me. I'm down for anything, anytime. So, no, is the answer to that.
I'm good.
As
All right.
he's falling asleep.
Let's go for like another 30 minutes, and then we'll just put a pin in it wherever it's at.
Yeah, and you gotta practice your YouTube outros. Like, in next video, or we'll continue this.
Exactly. And also, I'm pretty sure I'm doing this wrong. So there's that too.
That's what editing's all about.
Yeah, I'll come back and just be like, and now it's done. Funny how that works, right? Or I'll just do like the time lapse thing where it's just
Oh,
like
yeah.
me doing it wrong a bunch of times, but you can't actually see where I'm doing it wrong because it's moving really fast.
Yeah, it's gonna be beautiful.
This is definitely not right. It's definitely just like this. I'm 100% sure.
I like the certainty, confidence. You know,
I'm 100%
confidence is
sure
sexy.
that I'm wrong. Or I'm 100% sure that I got it wrong. So what you're saying is like I need to have more sex appeal.
I don't think we could fit anymore. Don't you need a 270 in there?
Yes, I do. This one should be 270 because 360 and 0 are the same thing. Good call.
Yay! I learned something.
I check the chat, see if that's the correct syntax.
I checked the chat. Oh, I wonder why that popped down. See chat. Case expression. Yeah. Yeah. I don't have to put those what you call them? Greater than, less than signs.
Oh, okay.
So this should work. I was writing it like it was an if statement where I like put it in parentheticals and I use the equivalence check or whatever, like the 2 equal signs. But like the whole point of this is I don't have to do that because what this is doing is it's saying switch based on this value. So if this value is this, if this value is this, so I don't have to keep writing dir over and over again. And then the break is to make sure that after I run the code based on this particular condition, it's not going to run the next line because that's how programming works, is that it just reads everything from top to bottom very dumbly unless you tell it like what to ignore. So we say break so that whenever it runs a certain case, it'll do the code, it will do stuff here, and then it will break and ignore the rest of this inside of this switch, and then it will move on to the next section of code. So I'm thinking. Cases 0. Okay, now we get into a spot here where there's a couple different ways that we could do this. And I'm pretty sure I know which way I want to do it, but I'm gonna say it out loud here to just follow the logic of it. The way that the player's laser beam works right now is it's based on a concept called ray casting. And what ray casting is it's basically a way that you can build a line segment in a game in a way where it's variable length based on what it's colliding with. And the reason why they call it ray casting is because it's like casting a beam of light. So I'm going to go back to my sketch pad here. the way that the player laser works is that if this is the player and this is the thing that's blocking it, um, like I know that the player is here. I know that the thing that the laser is going to hit is here. What I do is I basically build out segments of the laser 1 pixel at a time, um, kind of like backwards to from the destination to the origin. So like I do a check and I find out that this is the thing that is going to block the laser. And then for each segment that I need between me and the player, I'm going to like print a segment, print a segment, print a segment until eventually it's a straight line. That doesn't look very straight, but it looks like it's one solid line, but really what I'm doing is I'm building it pixel by pixel. So that way I don't run into issues where like it might skip over objects, or it might like be blocked by something it's not supposed to be blocked by, stuff like that. The other way that I could do it is, and I actually don't have to redraw this, I could come in and say the way these laser posts work is that it's trying to find the post closest to it. And if that post is in range, just draw a line from the top of my tower to the top of its tower and call it done. Um, the reason why that's important for me to think about out loud right now is because if we just draw a static line between those 2 points, we're not going to be able to do things like cheaper collision detection for whenever enemies are like close to a particular part of the fence that's not one of the posts. So if these are the 2 posts and there's a line here, like if we're just drawing a line, unless we do a really expensive collision check that's like checking to see if any single point along this line has an enemy next to it, there's no easy way for us to determine like where bugs are like next to the fence if we just draw a straight line. If we use ray casting and each segment is doing a check to build out the length of that laser, we can piggyback off of that system and say, okay, at this point where it's like building this laser beam across these 2 posts, there's also a bug next to me, like flag that as like something's next to me. And then like keep building the laser as long as I'm not blocked. So I think for now, we don't really need to worry about ray casting because we're not entirely sure what we might do with that information right now. All we want to do right now is we want to play around with the targeting, which is going to be based on the power towers, the fence posts. So the cheapest way to do this is really to just draw a line. And because of that, it may be cheaper to ignore all of this in the step event and just add a special check to the draw event.
Have you thought about how we're going to have to, because it's not going to just, I'm assuming that you want it to have to meet another tower in order to like actually draw or have the line or the laser created, sorry. Like you can't just project a laser out so far
Oh, you would
with no tower receiving it. So you're gonna have to have that most likely, and then you have because you'll have to like check everything in between, make sure there's not a tree blocking
That's
it.
actually a really good point. Check this out though. Hear me out on this. That's actually a really good point. What if what if the way it worked was that you only actually had to power one of the power towers, and then as long as you were reflecting its laser beam from post to post that was in range, you could create a continuous circuit.
Yeah.
What kind of impact would that have? That would mean that if the post goes down, if any post goes down that was passing energy from one post to another, that entire section of your grid, of your fence would go out. But that would be true regardless.
Well, I mean, if you did it, you could safeguard Because if you're worried about that being the case, the way you could build the actual like fence is to have, a tower projecting to a tower, and then just build another tower next to the one that was receiving, and have it go to another one. So that way, the whole system doesn't go out.
But in
So
order
there'd be a
in order to put in those safeguards, you would have to route more power to towers that are otherwise they don't have power of their own.
exactly.
They're just angling it.
Yeah, so you could be energy efficient and have it that way, and if one tower goes down, your entire fence around your facility goes down because you only wanted to use one power.
Yeah,
But you could also build it to where you're using a lot more power, but it's much safer if one goes down.
I think that is interesting. What do you think?
Mike, we need you.
I think it's probably too early to tell, but there's
I
something
mean,
about that I think is kind of exciting.
yeah, I would say try it out, see how you like it.
Okay, let's go with that, which means I'm probably going to ignore all this for a second. I'm going to do something way cheaper and easier. Um, and in order to do this, I'm going to have to do an override. So, sorry to take you through the fun house here. Um, I know I'm already looking at this, but I need this window so that I can come here. Oh, did I already have that open? No, I did not. Weird, I usually do that. Probably because I'm talking and doing this at the same time. Um, oh yeah, obviously I did it because I had to do it for the laser. Yeah, really we can repurpose a lot of this then. So this is our old code. I even put a line here as a reminder that eventually I have to come and update this for the sentry turrets, because if you're using Game Maker's line drawing functions, they will never be as performative as drawing like sprite assets on the screen. So if I had like 80 turrets going, firing off at bugs all at the same time in view of the camera, it would crash. It would like melt my game. So I'm only doing this for now because it's a cheap way to like test out ideas about lasers. Um, so I don't want people to. I don't know why I'm so concerned about it. I don't want you to think that I don't know that. I guess is all that is. So we're not going to play any sound because we don't care about sound yet, which means we can get rid of this too. And we're doing the inherit. This is the other cool thing about inheritance with children is that you can say whether it's inheriting from the parent either before a set of code that you're writing or afterwards. So in this particular scenario, I'm doing it afterwards, and the reasoning for that is based on how player interactions work, which I'm not going to get into, but that's why it's underneath this time instead of on top. So right here, it's saying if target equals none, all this stuff doesn't matter because this is relative to the laser. All we want to do for now, because I'm being so long-winded about this, all we really want to do is we want to just draw a line at a fixed length and just test out like how we can make those angles work. Um, and we don't want a circle on the end. We just want a line. We're going to do it from X offset and Y offset, which is going to be that top point of the two-cell tall object. So the offset's like up here. And the place that it's going to point is not going to be a target because it doesn't have a target. So this is where we get to put in some different code here. What we're actually going to do is we're still going to hardwire direction at 90 degrees, uh, which is 0. And we're going to use a really nifty function in GameMaker called lengthdir_x and its partner lengthdir_y. And I'll write out these two bits of code and then I'll kind of explain what they're doing. So I'm going to say var xx equals length dir x. The length for now we're going to hardwire, or actually I think we kept the, yeah, we kept the range from the previous thing. So we'll piggyback off of that max range. And then the direction is going to be dir, which we're hardwiring. And then we'll do the exact same thing for YY. Okay. Oh, whoops, got to change that. So what the heck is that doing? What this is doing is Game Maker, in as many ways as it can, tries to take some of the more fundamental, like math-based problems that you have to solve with programming as it relates to like finding things spatially in a 2D environment, and it tries to simplify them to like really high-level functions. And a really good example of that is length dir x and length dir y. What these functions are doing, and I can actually pull up the manual here to kind of like show an example of it, is that whenever you're trying to figure out where a second point on a line is going to be, you know the origin, but you don't know exactly where it needs to like live in the room because it's coming off at a particular angle. What this function allows you to do is it allows you to tell it how far away the second point needs to be, and it's asking for what angle that point is in relation to the origin, and it uses those two values to basically do some like really basic trigonometry. Is this trigonometry? I think it's trigonometry. It uses that to basically calculate the side of this triangle here, and like how long it needs to be and at what angle it needs to be kind of like pointing out from. So we use length dir x and length dir y and tell it how far away it is and at what angle, and then those two things together give us this x, x, y, y, so that we can draw a line at a specific angle that is a specific length. It does all that math for us. So now going back to our code, now that we know what these are for, when we come down here to our line, our origin is going to be the top of that tower, and then we're going to say xx, which we just calculated above, and yy. We're going to say the width of it is 2, which is arbitrary because eventually we're going to rip out the whole like line function thing. And then we're just specifying a color, which this is like my global color palette, color lime. GameMaker has built-in colors, so I could say like underscore C underscore green is like a built-in GameMaker green. But since I'm trying to make everything thematically look the same, I'm using predefined colors. So that's all this is. It's nothing scary. It's just called global so that I can grab it from anywhere. So that should, if we place this object in the room, based on its inheritance from the parent, we should be able to only print it on top of a power tile or place it on top of a power tile. It should start out without any power. So it should have the lightning bolt symbol above it to say, I don't have power. Because we're not doing that check here in the draw event, it's going to ignore the fact that it's not built and it doesn't have power, and it's still going to draw a line at a 90-degree angle that should shoot out the right of the tower. So what we're going to do now, before we invest any more time or energy into like building on top of this, is we're going to just make sure that that fundamental logic is being inherited properly, and that we don't have any like critical oversights or bugs before we like start doing anything more complicated. So I'm going to come into my room. And also because we're constantly being attacked by bugs, I'm actually going to turn them off for a minute so that we have no bugs attacking us, at least not for now. And what I'm going to do, because I don't really want to waste time, like, oops, I don't want to waste time hitting zoom buttons I shouldn't be hitting. I'm going to grab some pre-built tiles, and I'm just going to snap them here in the room so that we can basically play out our basic fence scenario. So eventually we might put one there and one here and one here to kind of like make a box. And I'm going to grab that object we just made, obj power tower, and I'm going to put it right there. We'll definitely have to change the art on this because it was designed to be a standalone. So like thematically, it's not really working because it doesn't look like it's plugging into these outlets like the other structures do, but that's okay. Yeah, let's hit play on that and just see how it's broken because we know it's broken, but we should find out how first. Okay, so a couple things. It's not showing the power indicator, but that's because it hasn't been printed yet. I'm pretty sure that's how the logic works. So that's fine. I was wrong to say that it should work that way. The angle is like totally off. It's pointing at like, I don't know, like what is that? That's like 135 degrees. So something wrong happened there. And if we print it, let's see what happens. It could be that maybe it doesn't have this direction because it's something I forgot to do. I'm able to find it. OBJ power grid controller. Oh, interesting. That's probably not going to be worth it for us to figure out today. But the other stuff I can still work on. So we thought that this was going to come like directly off of the sprite to the right.
Well, at one point, you put 128 in the step event. That was pretty close to what that angle was. Is it pulling that by accident for something?
Oh, did I put these in the wrong? Well, no, that's the length. And then the direction is 0.
Because it was the how far it was supposed to project itself was 128.
Yeah, that's over here in the create event. So max range is 128. And then over here in these functions, if you look, I'm pointing at the screen like you can see that. You see where my mouse is down here?
But
Probably
isn't that the
not.
same variable?
Yeah, it is the same variable. But what I'm trying to point out is like this function, it takes two variables. One of them is length and one of them is direction. So the length is 128 and the direction is the second slot, which should be 0, which is why it's confusing that it's not just coming off at a right angle. Oh, I know why. Dewey, what I forgot to do is that what this does is it's calculating it's calculating the length and angle of a line, but it doesn't know what the origin of that line should be. I didn't tell it that. What I actually needed to do is say this. And now it should work. Yeah, what this is doing is it's saying, well, I'm going to do something that's this long at this angle, but it doesn't necessarily know what the starting point is. So you need to tell it this is the starting X, and then from this position, we're going to add a line that is this long at this angle, and then the same thing for the Y. So let's go ahead and hit play on that and see if that's what it was. Yeah, okay, that fixed it. So now, yeah, like how awesome is that? We have a green line that points to the right. We've only been talking for like, I don't know how long now. How long have we been on this call?
All right, Jay, we've had this conversation before. All right, that didn't exist before you made it.
That's true. I
All
am
right.
So
his
that
creator.
means
All
it's
right,
pretty awesome.
All right, Jake. Next challenge is putting another line underneath the line.
And shading everything in
Yes.
with
Because
opacity.
you want a double line fence, Mike? Is that what I'm gathering?
Well, those are the lasers.
Yeah. See, they need
Gotta
to
create
like
a wall.
optically like they need to go down to the ground.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sure.
Yeah.
Fuck it. Let's do that. So the easiest way to do that is we're gonna do. Think about how I want to do this.
Also, I'm just gonna point out red is like so much better than green for a laser wall.
Oh, all the power's green though. I can
How
play
many
around with
times have
that.
you seen a green laser wall?
That's cosmetic stuff, Ryan. We're not there yet.
It's
Your
true.
point is well taken, though. Green does in a lot. Well, I mean, that's also like culturally based, right? Because like in India, like red is the opposite of what it means here or something. I don't know. I'm ignorant.
So you keep doing your thing, and I'm gonna point out like what. Actually, I can't even point out what red laser walls from movies I can think of. Hold on, I gotta look this up. Super important.
No, you're good. I'm just gonna do this real cheap for now. Actually, let's put a
Oh,
third one on there. You want to do 3 lines? Get crazy
Sure.
with it?
Resident
This is
Evil.
probably.
That's what I'm thinking of. The dude gets cut into mincemeat.
Yeah. What about it?
That's red. Imagine if
Oh,
it was
yeah.
green. That would not have made the same effect.
I'll have to watch it again, man. Shocktober's coming up. Yeah, well, they're not like equally spaced, but we can fix
Yeah.
that.
That's kind of how it.
This is where I'm just
Now,
like using magic numbers where I shouldn't be, but fuck it, we're just prototyping.
coding wise, is there a way to, or are you gonna have to create like a sprite to shade everything in between the lines? So if you put a line at the top, a line at the bottom, and then
But
it got
you
filled
don't
in
want to do that
between.
with
Seems
lasers,
like,
right?
oh, that's true. Yeah, because I mean, this is an easy way of just seeing through it. Yeah, never mind. Forget I said anything.
You're good. It definitely looks like based on the height of the player, like looking at the scale here, it definitely looks like they're just running underneath it, right?
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
you can add like 3 more lines,
Yeah.
same
I'm
intervals.
just starting to wonder if we're making this more complicated than it needs to be. Things get exponentially easier when you're working in a grid system if objects are like a one-to-one like scale. So if the height of the thing was um, if it was in a 32 by 32, if it only took up like the room that it has on this base, like would that look right? And may that be like that might actually be like easier to move to futz around with whenever we start like changing the angles and stuff.
Yeah,
Because
definitely.
I'm gonna run
Yeah.
into weird like collision issues whenever it's like pointing a different direction, like up here, because then
Yeah.
it's like, okay, are they running into the beam or are they running into the laser? Like, what's going on?
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Like you can just make it. It doesn't have to be like a tower. There's plenty of
it'd be like a cube.
instances where it's like a cube, or like it's got a square base and there's like a little raised up area in the middle that's living at the laser.
Yeah.
There's a whole lot of different
It's like
things
you're
you can
looking from
do.
top
Aesthetically,
down,
that too.
so you wouldn't see any lines other than the first one.
Yeah, let's explore this idea. What the hell? Oh, I've got the symmetry line on. Let's see. Ah, come on. Actually, I need to be way taller than that, right? Let's just get the outline first. Oh, it's off by 1 pixel. Whatever you do, don't do what I'm doing right now because it's a waste of time. But I can't let it go. Yeah, okay. It's about maybe that tall. Let's just go with, let's go with that. At that point, it doesn't look right though, because it should be a cube, right? Like a perfect
Well,
cube.
what I was thinking of is like a cube, and then you'd have in the middle just like a small cube as like
Yes.
your top.
Yeah, a cube with a smaller cube. You can put like shadows on a shit later, but just like a cube with a smaller cube that's a different color.
Yeah, it's like you're looking from the top down onto a like a post.
I would say it doesn't even have to be a post. It could just be like some kind of thing that doesn't really raise up that tall.
Yeah, it's fine.
I'm not really sure what y'all are saying.
Like make it all one color, like all that. Just make it all one color, like the yeah. So then make a square in the center of that, and that would be your
Oop.
yeah. There you go. And then make that that. Okay, there you go.
Boom.
Something along there. That so basically your base is your darker color, and then your gray. I guess your gray is your tower like protruding up.
Is this the top of it?
Yes, so you're looking
Yeah,
down.
okay. Yeah, that won't work. Because that, like, now you're mixing perspectives, right? So let me explain. Now that I understand what you're saying. So check this out. Um, Nothing in here, including the player, though the player does kind of cheat a little bit. Everything in here is kind of like at a 45-degree angle. That kind of
Okay.
like creates the cohesive look and feel of the game. Um, and even here, see here, like you can see the top of this, but you can see the top of this in relation to like how tall this is and like how wide it is. And then this base, it's kind of
So
like centered on top of that.
can you chop off like 80% of that and then just use that?
Yeah, we
Like
could do
the
that.
top is like chop off half of it and see what it looks like.
Yeah, let's just do that in Game Maker. That'll be faster. Um, just edit the sprite directly. And let's make sure we're chopping it off.
Add a 32, yeah. There you go.
Yep.
Yeah, just saw it right off.
What's the marquee tool in this thing? Here we go. Just cut it off.
Or
Like
can you actually scale it down? Would scaling it look really weird?
I think this looks better.
that. I don't know what you mean by scale it though.
Like you scale it
Is
all like you
taking the
scale
original and fitting it all into one cell.
yeah. You make it very small looking.
Oh, potentially. We're really getting into like art territory right now though. So let's
Yeah,
just like let's go with this and
that one looks good.
Beautiful.
we'll just we'll clean it up a little bit because like we do want to reinforce our visual vocabulary that solid means you can't walk through it. Anyways, whatever. None of this shit matters. And I'm gonna go ahead and kill that. And let's see. I still need to. The collision mask is going to be off on this until I crop it. So we're going to need to crop it real quick. And I'm going to crop it from the bottom corner. And the height of it should just be 32. There. There's our really shitty looking tower, but that's fine. Okay, now over here, what we have to change is this X offset and Y offset, because now it's not like a tower. That doesn't make sense anymore. So what we're gonna do instead, we still kind of need that offset. What's tricky about drawing lines in pixel art is that you have no concept of anti-aliasing. And what I mean by that is everything is an absolute pixel value. So there are no half pixels where you can kind of like blend between colors or anything like that. So because our object in our grid system is all even numbers, it's a 32 by 32, there is no absolute center that is a single pixel value, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Yeah, so what we have to do is we have to cheat a little bit. So what I'm going to do here for X offset and Y offset is I think that's actually already what I want it to be, because we basically cut off the top and now we're saying I want to find the center of it. The origin of the sprite is always going to be the top left corner. So what we're saying here to account for the offset is we're going to do half of 32 for the height, but slightly more than that for the X value. And I can explain why, but it's easier to see why with a visual. So let's go ahead and hit run on that and see what happens. We should have our lines just like move down a cell is what I'm expecting to see.
Believe.
Yes, but the placement is off. The placement is off because we placed this asset in the room when it was taller than this. So if I go to the room, the code is actually fine. It just floated up in the editor. Yeah, and it's going to look weird. Anyways, we spent way too much time talking about the art. But now, in order to just show like how this is going to work, whenever we have dynamic code with it, actually, like I want to try to get in real quick the player actually interacting with this thing, because I think that's the more interesting thing that we want to look at. Yeah, I'm going to see if I can do it. Let's see. I have to think about how I want this to work. I think I just realized something about how this is going to be incompatible with the parent object. So I'm going to have to look at the parent object real quick. I'm unfortunately touching a lot of stuff that I haven't touched in a while, and I don't have it in RAM, so it's kind of taking me a minute to remember exactly how some of this stuff works.
So
So
how much recording do we have so far? Sorry, I'm just seeing a busting. Like,
I think we're coming up on like 2 hours now, right?
I think so, yeah. I think we didn't actually get started until about 9.
It was like 9:30.
Yeah, so we're a little over 2 hours, I think.
Oh, okay. Let's hard stop. Let's hard stop at the top of the hour. No matter where we're at, we're gonna close it. How's
Yeah.
that?
And then how long do you want to have discussing the actual stream?
Oh, I mean, whatever you guys like. We'll just see how it goes. Like 30
All right.
minutes, I guess.
You got
Um,
17 minutes. Hit it. We're gonna make this beautiful laser.
yeah. So let's play our next. Yeah. So this is our code that we use in the parent object so that whenever they interact with things like the furnace or the laboratory, they can walk up next to us. The player can walk up next to these structures and press the interaction key, which is F, and then it'll put on the GUI layer like a menu where they can make a selection. That's like baked into the parent structure is this logic of like you can walk up to something, press F, and it will show a menu, because a lot of structures do that. What we need to do is we need to allow the player to interact with the tower after it's been placed. So when they press F, the easiest way to program this and test it is that every time they press F, it's just going to like rotate the angle. So if it's 90, then it'll go down and then left and then up, and then they just can like toggle it around.
Is that easier than just giving them a menu saying which way to do, like face?
It's easier to program. I'm not necessarily saying that it's like easier and easier, like I'm not talking about like usability of like the game or like the experience of the game right now. I'm just talking about in like straight up programming terms. Like
No, I meant based on what you already have, pulling up the menu and everything, can you just plug in like a direction that way?
oh, not easily, because those menus are all pulling from a table of like a
Okay.
database is like how it's feeding values into it.
Okay.
So like, yeah, it's way more of a headache than what you might think, because those aren't
Yeah.
hardwired values.
Yeah.
Um,
Got
so
it.
the thing that we for sure want is we want to still use this script to check that if this object is the closest interaction to the player or not. And this part is still relevant where we're checking this. This part is not. That part is. So really, this is going to have to be a place, at least for now, where we're forking off from the parent object and we're not piggybacking off of this code. But I'm going to copy parts of it so that we can reuse it. Um, yeah, which means over here for is interactive, we're actually going to put false. And this is going to bother me. I'm going to have to come back and figure out how to fix this later, because that's going to get really confusing. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to put it in right here. So check closest interaction. What is this thing doing? Well, it's a little script that I wrote, a very simple script. And what it does is it checks to see if the player's trying to target this particular structure. And if it is, then I am its closest interaction. If they're not targeting me, then I'm not their closest interaction. And what this is doing is whenever the player is running around targeting things, um, yeah, here we go. Um, when the player is running around targeting things, we only want them to interact with one object at a time. So if they're standing next to two furnaces, technically the player may be in range to interact with both of those furnaces, but they only want to interact with one, and they want it to be the closest one. So every step of the game, the player is checking to see if there are interactable objects around it. And if there's more than one, it's going to return the one that is closest to it, which is great, but the object that might have been interacted with has no concept of the fact that the player has like other things that it might interact with. So it's not entirely sure if the player wants to come up and like press the interaction key on it or not, which means it doesn't know if it should put a white outline around it and like a F key above it that says like press F. So what we have to do in order to get around this issue is we use this script to basically catch all the different scenarios where this structure can be interacted with and the player is within range to interact with it, but the player has better things to do. Like they're closer to another object, or like they're currently in a menu for a different structure, like whatever it may be. this is basically checking to see like, I may be the closest interaction, I might not be. If the player already has a target and it's not me, then I shouldn't do all the stuff that comes after this. So we'll do this check. And then down here, we're going to let the player interact with the structure if it is powered or not working or something. We can just take this out for now. And we're going to take this out because that only matters for things that have menus. So what this line is now doing very simply is it's saying if I am the closest interaction to the player and the player is pressing key interaction, which is the F key, then I want something to happen. So down here, if we say that var direction equals 0 every frame of the game, which we're actually going to have to change that because that'll reset every frame. So down here, we'll just say dir equals 0 as the starting. And then instead of declaring this custom variable every step, what we're going to do is we're going to say if the player presses F, dir plus equals 90. So what that should do is every time they press F, it's going to add 90 degrees to the angle of the laser. And because over here in the draw event, we're basing all of this based on what is now not a temporary variable, which is defined in the step event. The draw event comes after the step event. It will draw the laser at the current angle, which is set by the last interaction that the player did. So we'll go ahead and hit play on that, and we'll see. I get the feeling like this isn't going to work because I harvested a bunch of code from the parent object, and there's probably something in there important that I stripped out, but we'll see. Ah, fuck, it's not going to let me interact with it until it's built. And it's got that bug that I don't want to fix right now. I'm pretty sure. Let's see what happens. Okay, well, at least that didn't happen. It's still going to be upset because it doesn't have power. And that's fair. We'll just build some. Oh, weird. Oh, fuck, I placed this off a pixel in the room, so it's not going to line up correctly. These both need to be here. And then while we're in here, let's just go ahead and place these so we don't have to print them in the game. Like watching grass grow. Oh man, this shit was way off. Oh, because I've got this set to a 16 by 16. Doi. Just put this here. 9 minutes. T minus 9 minutes. Until you all decide I'm not the right streamer for you. Print it. Please work. Okay, cool. Closest interaction is not working though. Let's plus the interaction key. So we're not getting any errors. It's not detecting it at all yet. So we're going to figure out why that is. With some good old-fashioned debugging. I'm pretty sure this, you probably won't see me. If that doesn't show up in my output, then I know that closest interaction is failing. The logic of it anyways. Nowhere is the word probably found. Yeah, so this whole section here is not executing, which means that this is not being checked, which means that over here it's not checking the player's closest target interaction is not equaling this structure, which means that the player, there's something wrong with the player's ability to detect this structure. It's not picking it up. So we're actually going to have to debug this in the player object. So if I go to the player suit and I'm looking at the target interaction, we need to find or remember where that's set, which is right here. So what this is doing is it's looking, yeah, here we go. It's looking, I think I already figured out the problem.
You're so smart.
No, I didn't. What it's doing is it's looking for collisions around the player in a circle inside of its interaction range for these particular types of objects, and then it's putting them on a list. And then if we have at least one item in that list, it's going to come through and say, okay, this interaction instance that I found, if it is interactive, that's probably what it is because I just turned that off. And can interact is true, that's absolutely what it is. Yep. Back to wherever the fuck I was here. I need to make this true. It was right all along. That might fix it. Let's see. I should just pre-build this.
I like it. It's exciting. It's like, oh, here it comes. Almost done.
But we're still not there. Something about it still doesn't like. Oh, I deleted that line. If powered is true, we'll just go ahead and hardwire this for now. Which that would be true. That would be true anyways. Because if it's built and it's powered and it hasn't been destroyed, then the player should always be able to interact with it. So it's an interactable object. It's set up so that the player can interact with it because it's built and powered. And then we're going to do the check to see if it's the closest interaction. Let's see if that fixes it. In 4 minutes. This is where I need these 3 seconds back with this laser printing. No, still nothing. Interesting. Interesting, 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 interesting. Maybe it's not a child of this. The parent is OBJ Light. But why do you have no children?
Maybe it just wasn't in the cards, or they couldn't find the right partner. Not really a question you ask people, Jake.
Oh, shit. I might have a much bigger problem on my hands here. Hold on. Yeah, let me check something else. I may have accidentally broke it everywhere earlier today with a change that I made. I absolutely broke it everywhere. Shit. Okay, how am I going to fix that? It'd probably help if I explain the problem. So what I did was whenever I introduced the day-night cycle, I had to create a parent object for sources of light or things that made light. And one of the confusing things about how this works, at least in GameMaker, is that a child can never have more than one parent. It's like Disney rules. Um, So whenever you go in and you say, oh, cool, I just made this new parent group called um, interactions parent, everything underneath that is going to be something that the player should be able to interact with. Great, let me assign all these things to it. Then over here, you create this other parent object and you say, oh, all of these things make light. And some of those things are actually things that are also interactive. That thing can't have like both those parents. And instead of like throwing a warning whenever you make changes like that, it's like, okay, cool. You basically just say that they forgot this parent and now they have this new parent. So the problem that I have is that whenever I introduce the lighting effects, all the right things now show light, but it broke all of the interactions because now interactions parent has nothing underneath it because they're all light sources. And I'm not going to be able to solve that problem in a minute. So that's where we're gonna have to stop, which is
Now,
unfortunate.
you said that they can have multiple children though,
They
and
can
they
have,
can draw
yeah.
from children.
Hmm.
So would you just do that, like draw, make it a child and draw from it?
Well, what I'm going to have to figure out is there has to be, I can't have bilateral hierarchy. I have to have it set up so that if there's an interactions object, a subset of that might be things that make lights, and then a subset of that may be like structures. What I can't do is say there's this thing that's interactive, there's this thing that makes lights, and then they share children together.
Yeah.
So it can be like infinitely nested vertically, but I can't have something from this vertical parent-child stack also exist over here in this bilateral parent-child stack, if that makes sense. Probably not.
Well, I
Maybe
was
I'll draw a
just
picture.
stating that it would that you would basically have. I don't know how this works in Game Maker, but you could just plug it, like have it as its own piece of code, and then just plug it into each thing as a child that you need it to be. So, like, say anything that's going to create a light source, it's not going to be the parent because you have the interactive one or something like that. Anything that's going to be a light source, you're just going to have to plug in
Yeah,
um,
yeah, that's another way I could do it.
below it.
Like, yeah, I could come over. Uh,
Like, couldn't you just technically take all your code from interactive and just plug it in as a child? Something similar to that. I don't know. I'm probably getting stuff mixed up. As of your object, it's not efficient at all. I don't think.
no, I think I know what you mean. Why am I? What would you like? Yeah, see here, you can see else. What I should do, I think I know how to fix it. I think I know how to fix it, is that the light parent will be the highest parent. Then I'll have some things that generate light are interactive, and some of the things that are interactive are structures. If I do it that way, then that will all cascade correctly. But I won't do that right now because we're over time. We're 2 minutes past the hard stop. So I'm going to go ahead and kill the recording here, and I'll do my ending spiel, which at this point, I think, anyways, I'll go back and watch it later. But, well, thanks to you guys for coming and kind of going through this with me. I think that it's definitely very helpful for me to talk out loud about stuff that I'm working on. It's very difficult to actually like write code and talk and maintain a conversation at the same time. Like I don't have the proper like um, I haven't developed those muscles, so to speak. It's pretty difficult. And I now have a much bigger admiration for people that like do this with live streams because that's just like that seems incredibly difficult. Um, but I do plan on doing this type of thing once a week. It may not always be on Fridays, but it'll probably be closer to the end of the week, and I'll probably keep a general format of like, here's what I worked on, and then work on something in real time. Um, Also, this month, the month of October, I'll be participating in DevTober, which is a month-long game jam where you post daily updates on some project that you're working on. It doesn't have to be something that you're starting from scratch, like most jams are. It could be something you've already been working on. The whole goal is it's just like a motivation thing. Like make sure that you're coming out with something every day, and post it with the hashtags Devtober. So I'll be doing that to post daily updates, and then I'll be doing this once a week, and archiving the videos on YouTube. So thanks, and I'll post somewhere when I'm going to do this next. So at this point, I don't really know how to end the stream, but I would say something like that, I guess.
And don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe.
Yeah, and don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe. But at this point, I don't really care because I need to figure out what I'm doing first. So, yeah, I'm going to go ahead and end the recording here and then we can do our debrief.